The sky over the Pacific looked calm.
Too calm.
Blue stretched endlessly above the vast waters of the Pacific Ocean, hiding the chaos that was about to unfold. For a moment, there was nothing, no gunfire, no engines screaming, no warning. Then a distant hum. It grew louder, sharper, closer. Japanese pilots gripped their controls, eyes scanning the horizon. They had done this countless times before.
They knew the sky.
They owned it. Their aircraft, the feared Mitsubishi A6M Zero, had dominated since the early days of World War II. Fast, agile, deadly. They trusted it. They trusted themselves even more, because until now, nothing had truly challenged them. But something was coming. Something different. Far above, cutting through the sky with quiet confidence, a new shape appeared. Heavier, stronger, unfamiliar. The Grumman F6F Hellcat. At first glance, it didn't look like a threat. Too bulky, too solid, too slow, or so they thought. That assumption would cost them everything. Inside the Hellcat cockpit, an American pilot steadied his breath. His hands were firm, his eyes locked forward. This wasn't just another mission. This was a test. The aircraft around him moved in formation, engines humming with controlled power. These pilots had been trained differently, carefully, deliberately. They had studied the Zero, its strengths, its weaknesses, its patterns. And now they were ready. The distance between the two forces shrank. Seconds stretched. Then contact. The sky exploded. Zeros dove with speed, twisting and turning with unmatched agility. It was their signature move, to outmaneuver, outturn, outfight. But this time, something was wrong. The Hellcats didn't turn with them. They didn't chase blindly. Instead, they climbed, higher, faster, controlled. Japanese pilots hesitated, just for a moment. That moment changed everything. A Hellcat rolled into a dive. Fast, violent, precise. Gunfire erupted. Heavy rounds tore through the sky, striking a Zero before it could react. The aircraft shuddered, smoke trailing behind it as it spiraled downward.
Gone.
The first shock hit. This wasn't normal. This wasn't how these fights went. Another Hellcat swept through, its speed overwhelming. A second Zero tried to evade, turning sharply, but the Hellcat didn't follow. It climbed again, then came back down, faster, stronger, deadlier. Another burst of gunfire. Another explosion. Another Zero falling from the sky. Confusion spread. Japanese pilots pushed harder, relying on instinct, on training, on everything that had worked before.
But the rules had changed.
The Hellcat wasn't playing the same game. It absorbed damage. Rounds struck its frame, but it kept flying. The Zero could not do the same. One hit, one mistake, 1 second too late, and it was over. The sky filled with chaos. Engines roared. Gunfire echoed. Aircraft twisted through clouds of smoke and fire. But beneath it all, a pattern emerged. The Hellcats were winning. Not by luck, by design. Days turned into weeks. The encounters continued, each battle telling the same story. Japanese pilots entered the fight with confidence and left it with shock. Because no matter how hard they fought, the outcome was changing. The turning point came during the massive clash, known as the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Hundreds of aircraft filled the sky. It was one of the largest aerial battles ever fought, and it would decide who controlled the Pacific skies. Japanese forces launched wave after wave of attacks. Their strategy was clear: overwhelm, destroy, win. But waiting for them were the Hellcats. Ready, positioned,
Prepared.
As the enemy approached, American pilots moved with precision. No panic, no hesitation, just execution. The first wave hit and collapsed. Hellcats dove through enemy formations, their speed unmatched, their firepower devastating. Zeros tried to respond, but the balance had shifted too far. They couldn't keep up. They couldn't survive the hits. They couldn't adapt fast enough. Aircraft fell from the sky in flames, one after another. Then another wave. And another. Each one met with the same fate. The sky became a battlefield of fire. Smoke trails marked the end of aircraft that once ruled the air. Pilots who had once dominated now struggled to survive. And the Hellcats kept coming, relentless, precise, unstoppable. The scale of destruction became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just a victory. It was domination, so overwhelming it earned a name: the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But behind that name was something deeper, a realization. The Zero was no longer king. The sky no longer belonged to the Japanese. It belonged to the Hellcat and the pilots who mastered it. But even in victory, there was danger. Because the war wasn't over, not even close. And the more dominant the Hellcat became, the more desperate the enemy would grow. New tactics, new risks, new battles. And somewhere ahead, a moment was coming. A moment where even the Hellcat's power would be tested, where survival would depend on more than speed or strength. A moment that would push pilots to their absolute limits. And what happened next would change everything again. The sky didn't stay calm for long. It never did. Not anymore. What had begun as scattered encounters had now turned into something far more dangerous. Something inevitable. A shift. A silent takeover of the skies. Days after the first clashes, Japanese pilots returned to the air with something new: doubt. Not fear, not yet, but something close. They had faced the Grumman F6F Hellcat and seen it survive hits that should have ended a fight. They had watched it dive faster, strike harder, and climb away before retaliation. It wasn't just another aircraft. It was a problem. But problems could be solved. That's what they believed. So they adapted. Formations tightened. Attacks became more coordinated. Pilots relied even more on the agility of the Mitsubishi A6M Zero, its ability to turn tighter, to outmaneuver anything in the sky. This time, they would control the fight. The next encounter came without warning. High above the Pacific, the sky filled with motion. Engines roared. Shapes closed in. Two forces on a collision course. American Hellcats moved in formation, steady and controlled. There was no rush, no panic. They had learned something important. They didn't need to chase. They only needed to choose the moment. Japanese pilots saw them and attacked first. Zeros surged forward, diving aggressively, engines screaming as they closed the distance. For a brief moment it worked. A Hellcat broke formation. Another adjusted course. The sky tightened into chaos. Then the Hellcats climbed. Instead of turning into the fight, they pulled upward, higher and higher. The Zeros followed, and that was the mistake. At the peak, the Hellcats rolled over and came down like falling steel, faster than anything the Zeros could match. Gunfire erupted. One Zero was hit instantly, its wing tearing apart as it dropped from the sky. Another tried to evade, turning sharply, but the Hellcat didn't follow. It climbed again, then dove again. A pattern, a deadly rhythm.
Hit, climb, return.
Each pass more devastating than the last. Japanese pilots tried to adjust, but their greatest strength, maneuverability, was no longer enough. The Hellcat controlled the pace, the altitude, the fight itself, and the outcome. One by one, the sky began to empty, not of aircraft, but of hope. The realization spread quickly. This enemy couldn't be fought the same way. This enemy refused to follow the old rules. Below, the ocean reflected the battle above. Flashes of fire, trails of smoke, fragments falling into the water. The fight ended quickly. It didn't need to last. When it was over, the Hellcats remained. The Zeros did not. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Back at base, reports confirmed the truth. Losses were rising fast. Experienced pilots were gone. Aircraft destroyed. A confidence shaken. Across the ocean, American forces gained something critical: control. Air superiority. The ability to decide when and how battles would be fought. This became undeniable during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. Wave after wave of Japanese aircraft launched into the sky, determined to break through. But waiting for them were the Hellcats. The result was devastating. Aircraft fell faster than they could advance. Pilots who had once dominated now found themselves overwhelmed, unable to match the speed, durability, and firepower of their opponent. It wasn't just defeat. It was collapse. And it marked the moment when control of the Pacific skies truly changed hands. From then on, Every encounter carried the same truth. The Hellcat had taken control. Not because it was perfect, but because it was built for this war. Stronger. Faster in the right moments. Able to survive where others could not. And flown by pilots who understood exactly how to use it. The Zero was still dangerous, still capable, but no longer dominant. No longer untouchable. The balance had shifted. Permanently. For Japanese pilots, the sky was no longer a place of confidence. It was a place of uncertainty, of risk, of survival. And for Hellcat pilots, it was an advantage they would not surrender. Because they had learned something vital. In war, strength alone is not enough. Adaptation wins. Strategy wins. Timing wins. And in this case, so did the Hellcat. The echoes of these battles would carry through the rest of World War II, shaping every mission, every dogfight, every moment where the sky filled with fire and steel. What began as a challenge became dominance. What once stunned Japanese pilots became the new reality of war. The sky had changed.